Ave viewers! Lately, from xDeviant to Fall Guys, people online seem to love hating on skill-based matchmaking. I do not understand all the hate that skill-based matchmaking gets. I simply don't. Coming from me, it probably doesn't come as a shock, seeing as having fair games has been a repeated argument of mine throughout my last 3 videos. So this is where I'll come in and bust the bigger arguments that people that are anti-skill-based matchmaking are making, because to me, this simply does not make any sense. Players don't want to be playing a highly competitive or sweaty game each time they play. Sadly, you are playing a competitive game, there's no miracle about that. But to say that every game is sweaty because of skill-based matchmaking is putting blinders on. The games are only as sweaty as you want them to be. Let me explain. Let's say you are a casual player. You play just to have fun and do not care all that much about the outcomes. You experiment a lot and end up losing a lot of games. The matchmaking will then adjust your displayed skill to match you against players that were worse compared to the last game you played, slowly lowering your matchmaking rating, or MMR, and you'll have, quote, less sweaty games, end quote. But if you play super hard and winning is super important to you, well, your MMR will slowly rise, ensuring that you face harder opponents, which is completely fair, because no one likes losing over and over and over again, even if you are a lot more laid back. Also, to take back a page from the Souls-like community, victory is only as sweet as the struggle you had to go through. In the end, you are playing a competitive game. There will be one team that wins the game. That's it. You can insult other players all you want by saying they're sweaty, but in the end, you care just as much about winning as them, and maybe even more, because you got to a point where you felt necessary to complain online about skill-based matchmaking and how it's, quote, not fun. To me, this screams I want to crush lower skilled opponents. This screams player who likes smurfing. Why don't they make a ranked queue and a normal queue? They could let the normal queue have no skill-based matchmaking, right? This could be a repeat of the last argument, but I'll give another spin on it. Right now, in both wildly popular competitive games and smaller titles that died or are quickly dying, we see the same trend. People care so little about normal queue that you cannot have a fun game in them. In normal queues, people are deciding to throw incredibly fast, like first death and they disconnect. People leveling Smurf account and just playing horribly in general are in there too. Toxic player evading bans are in there too. So what do you think will happen if they create a normal queue without matchmaking? Normal queue will have a horrible match quality. And side note, normal queues usually have lower skill requirements in matchmaking, making larger gaps in skills between teammates and opponents. But ranked would be untouched for people who want to play properly. Yes, but why did you ask to have a normal queue in the first place? To have a place where you don't have to sweat. You won't have to sweat, but you'll probably be the only one playing properly, which won't make the game any more fun. If anything, it will drain the fun out of the game. There's threads after threads of that very problem in Omega Strikers, and it never got addressed. The exact same is happening with larger games such as League of Legends. Normal queue is basically viewed as the meme queue if you try to play it past level 30. Also, for games like Fall Guys, creating a ranked queue would honestly create other problems. Why a ranked queue? What is there to gain? You would just end up with a duplicated queue. The game is essentially the same. It would just reinforce the sentiment that you can throw all you want in normal queue, even if you are a solo match into a squad queue. I've also made the opposite argument that games could drop entirely the separate queue system, just to make sure everybody is playing where they are most comfortable to play at, all the time, just like in Dead by Daylight. Having 2 separate MMRs is stupid. It just entices players to play dumb in one queue and or have a queue to feel good and crush other players, ruining their opponent's day instead. And not having skill-based matchmaking in normal just disincentivizes new players to actually sit down and learn the game properly, because they would just get crushed so quickly that they'd have no pointers on how to improve. Which, in an even playing field, they could see small things that others are doing differently than they are. If you want a proper ranked mode with actual stakes, then you need to put robust systems in place, which, no one is doing. I have a previous video where I am addressing this subject in the iCard, top right. But you can have a certain amount of games where new players only play other new players. Then what happens once the game slows down and has less new player coming in? They don't get any matches? Or even worse, they're forced to play against the Smurfs and toxic players for 30 levels? This is absolutely not a good solution. It's not fun when you are good and your friend sucks, or vice versa. Hot take, maybe in the end you are the one that is sweaty every game you play. If you can't have fun losing at a game, then why are you playing it in the first place? Especially if you are playing it with a friend that you know is better than you. If you care that much, maybe you should ask for pointers from your friend, or if you want to just play the game, that's fine too, but you shouldn't get mad over it. Most competitive games I play now, I've learned because a friend of mine wanted someone to play with, so I learned it. I got dumpstered a lot playing with them. But I also found fun in those games. I remember fondly the games of LoL where, to chill out after a rough streak of losses, we would do an Ultimate Bravery. For those who don't know, Ultimate Bravery was a website that took for you a random champion, random summoner spells, and random items to build in a specific order, and you were forced to play those. Do not do this unless you are in a full premade. This mode, quote unquote, used to be decently popular. That would guarantee us to lose, but we would laugh our asses off through the entire game. Like, having to play attack speed Soraka was one of the funniest shit I've ever done. It's horrible, don't do it if you want to win, but it's so stupidly funny. Having lower skilled players in their own games just makes them a target. This has such high levels of blaming the victim. It's a shame that I even have to cover this, because, oh my god, 50 people agreed with this take? Those players would not play the game at all if there wasn't a skill-based matchmaking, because they would lose every game so stupidly fast. If there's too high of a skill difference, it's boring for the players who get beaten because they don't get to play the game or learn anything. It's boring for the players match with them because they have a dead weight. It's boring for the opponents because they could play against bots and they wouldn't notice the difference. Which is funny, because that's exactly what you said in your first point, except you only thought of people in a party. So either you're being hypocritical that you just want skill matchmaking to be gone, to be the one better than everyone else while playing with your friends, or you really don't understand what makes a game fun. If anything, that comment pointed out the bigger issue: Smurfing. Smurfing should not be a thing. Devs need to address this issue on their end. Once again, I have another 10 minutes videos in the R card, top right, on that subject. Players of all skills should be allowed to have fun playing other people of their own skills and win once in a while. Period. I don't even understand how this is even something that needs to be said. In the end, this is just a whole lot of conflicting messaging to the devs. We hate being matched against player our own skill. That's what you're saying to devs. And let's say devs just fold up and give you what you wanted and remove skill-based matchmaking. In before, you could just end up against harder opponents because the system was actually protecting you in the first place. Which brings us back to the starting square, where online games were just lists of servers with no skill-based matchmaking. Other than nostalgia, to me, this was a pain. especially as an introvert. To find games, you actually had to talk with people and try to find other players that had your skill level, which you had no real way to tell other than like their win rate, which could be heavily skewed because they were playing only against their other friends. And you had no idea. So yeah, long story short, those systems were developed for a reason, and that reason is to make sure that the game is a better, fairer place for everyone. To keep the martial arts analogy that I used in the past, it's to make sure that no black belts were put in a tournament of yellow belts. Anyway, that'll be all for me on this subject. If you disagree on some points, make sure to leave a comment. I'll reply to those who are willing to argue one another and not just throw insults. Also, as mentioned in the video, I released a bunch of video essays on competitive matchmaking and their diverse controversies, so if you are interested in watching more, here's 2 for you on the screen.